All right, moving on to chapter 23. Now, we talked about the Italian opera. We talked about women composers and performers in Italy at this time. We moved on to the English opera style. Now we're going to talk about musical sermons with Bach and the Lutheran cantata. So the Lutheran chorale and cantata, remember Martin Luther when he had his 95 Theses on how to reform the Catholic Church, and then they gave him the boot and excommunicated him? Well, he created his own branch of Catholicism, and this was his lasting contribution to Western culture, where he believed that congregational, meaning the whole congregation, the whole mass group attending the service, he really believed in congregational singing rather than having a soloist or professional musicians who are singing complicated and virtuosic stuff. That the congregation would really be the truest, purest form of worship. Now, the professional singers and instrumentalists, they create polyphony in the church service. But again, he really wanted to focus on the congregation and their contribution. Now, we have these chorales, which are German hymn tunes, and they were composed or recycled melodies and German poetry or biblical passages. Now, remember, this is in German, not Latin, like the Catholic Mass. And we have specific chorales that are integrated into weekly service. So, depending on the time of year or the event that's going on, they'll have a specific chorale for that, or something that's tied into the sermon of that week. And again, the chorales are sung in unison by the congregation. Now, with a professional choir, these would be sung in 4-part harmony. Here we have a picture, which was actually from a colored engraving, and this was where Johann Sebastian Bach worked for many years at Leipzig's St. Thomas Church. And it had a famous choir school, and which is seen in the background. And then this was engraved in 1749. So we have the Lutheran cantata. This was a multi-movement, so many different sections of music to create a whole piece, where we have works for soloists, the chorus, and orchestra. We have solo arias, recitatives, and choruses. Now, the musical sermon was an elaboration of a weekly hymn. And this was based on the gospel reading of that day, and it was an integral part of church service. Now, with Bach and the Lutheran cantata, Johann Sebastian Bach, who was born in 1685, died 1750, he was a culminating figure of the Baroque style. He was a German composer, organ virtuoso, and a devout Lutheran. He was renowned during his lifetime as a performer, so everyone knew about his organ capabilities. And here we have a picture of him. He also had court positions. He worked at Weimar and at the court of Anhalt-Köthen. In 1723 to 1750, at Leipzig, he worked at St. Thomas Church and with the Collegium Musicum. He had 2 marriages, and between the 2 marriages, he had 19 children. Whew. 4 sons led their lives as composers. However, even though he had so many children, not a lot of them survived past birth. But he had a musical family and 4 sons that carried on the musical tradition. Now, the style, that he wrote, he raised existing forms of music to a higher level. So a lot of these hymns, German hymns, or kind of folk-like music, he was able to manipulate them using counterpoint, and his way of using that and repurposing and refurbishing, if you will, these older songs into something new and creative. He was the master of this contrapuntal composition. Now, his output, he was very prolific in secular and sacred works, where we have suites and concertos, sonatas, keyboard music, and cantatas. And the St. John and St. Matthew Passions, we have the Well-Tempered Clavier and the Art of Fugue, and Brandenburg Concertos are some of his most popular pieces. 200 of Bach's cantatas survive, and with these cantatas, each cantata had 5 to 8 movements, and these were composed, he composed them at least 4 or 5 yearly cycles. So the cantata had a first, middle, and last movements were based on a choral tune and a chorale tune, and then with full ensemble. We have hymn-like settings to an intricate fugues. So it moves from something really simple and homophony, everyone's singing the same thing together, maybe slightly staggered, to really intricate fugues where everyone has different entrances, starting on different pitches, with lots of polyphony. So it varied in complexity. And then he interspersed, so injected, solos, duet arias, and recitatives throughout. Now, the cantatas that he wrote were for every mass, every weekly mass. So he wrote a lot, and he composed 4 or 5 yearly cycles. So this is for every Sunday of the year, creating a different cantata. That was a lot of music. Here we have Wachet auf, which means sleepers awake. And this is a cantata in 7 movements. The text is from the Gospel of Matthew, and it's a parable of the wise and foolish virgins. And the Lutherans prepare, in this parable, it tells the Lutherans to prepare spiritually for the second coming of Christ. Here we have a painting of the parable of the wise and foolish virgins by Peter von Cornelius. And the wise virgins greet Christ, the bridegroom. Now this hymn tune, which is a chorale by Philippe Nicolai back in 1599, this same hymn tune is sung later in the service by the congregation. Now the chorale tune is featured in 3 of the choral movements of this cantata. Now in the breakdown of Listening Guide 13 for the Bach cantata number 140, Wachet auf, Sleepers Awake, we are looking at numbers 1, 4, and 7, which were created in 1731. Now number 1, the chorale Fantasia, we have a stanza of one of the chorales, and it's in bar form, where we have the A theme again, and then the B theme. The beginning of this is majestic and march-like, showing, here's the arrival of Christ. And it's in an uplifting major key with insistent dotted rhythms in the orchestra. So it sounds very deep, 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 very march-like and, regal. And we have repeating instrumental sections. These are called ritornellos. It's complex and imitative polyphony in the lower voices. Now, number 4, we have a unison chorale, and that means everyone's singing the same pitch, the same time, as if we're one singer. And in stanza 2 of the chorale, we use bar form again, where we have the A theme restated, and then the B theme. And then we're in a bright major key. The chorale tune is sung in unison by tenors, and the counter melody is in the strings. And for chorale number 7, we have stanza 3 of the chorale also in bar form, A, and then B. Now the chorale melody is in the soprano line this time, and we have a fanfare-like opening with a homorhythmic texture. So remember, homorhythmic, think of, Handel's Alleluia, Alleluia. Everyone's singing the same rhythm, but their pitches are different to form those chords. And here we have the breakdown from the listening guide for Sleepers Awake with numbers 1, 4, and 7. And that's it for chapter 23. See you in class.